Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 3 of our AccelByte virtual GDC. I'm Shane. I'm going to be your host again today, and today's topic we're going to cover how to create a game on the AccelByte backend, and then also do an initial integration. So what we're going to be doing on that part is we're going to be downloading our Unity SDK from our documentation website, and we're going to import it into Unity. We're going to log a user in. So we'll get to that in probably about 5 or 10 minutes. But before that, I'm going to cover just who or what is AccelByte. This might be your first time visiting us, so important we don't skip over that particular piece of information. To that, AccelByte is a game backend platform. It's built by experts from companies such as Epic, EA, Microsoft, Ubisoft, and GameSparks, and a few more on top of that. So game backend platform specifically, we are a one-stop shop for microservices. So if your game needs to log users in, if you need to be able to manage your users, if you need e-commerce, social, such as friends and chat, matchmaking, player profile. So on your player profile, you can store data, you can store stats, you have cloud saves, telemetry, analytics, server orchestration, crash reporter, and quite frankly, loads more options and services. That's what AccelByte is, and that's what we provide. However, while we do offer a lot of out-of-the-box solutions, you could just take our login services, you could take our player profile and run away, and you don't need to do anything more than that. We are firm believers, and we've experienced in this particular field that there is no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to building the back end for your game. Every single game is different, even if they are in the same genre, even if they share the same DNA. No two games have exactly the same systems in place. So with that, you talk to us, you tell us what your game is about, you tell us how you want your game to play, and we'll work with you to customize our existing features to make sure that they behave exactly how you want them to behave for your specific game. If you need matchmaking to have a cool new unique twist to make players more interested in teaming up with each other, we're there to help facilitate that. If you want to store a new kind of information or new type of gameplay information about your players, we're going to help you do that and make it more dynamic or whatever you want it to be. We're here to help. Um, so just to cover a little bit more again about AccelByte and how we actually provide our services, generally what's going to happen is you will talk to us. You'll send us an email at hello@accelbyte.io. You'll visit our lovely website, and it covers our features. You can click our little Ask Us Anything button down here on the page, and we will get back to you as quick as possible. We will have some discussions. We will sign a contract together and make sure that everyone's on agreement about what exactly is being provided. And then what's going to happen is if you're using AccelByte Cloud, we will spin up a instance for you for our backend platform. And an important thing to note about that particular instance is it is a single tenant instance. So the difference that is there between our platform and other third-party backend platforms is most of them tend to provide what we would call multi-tenant platforms, so that your game is running on a cluster of servers that are all sharing space and resources with from anywhere to 2 to 100 other games at any given time. And what that means is, and why that could be bad for you, is your game is running. You're just about to launch, let's say, on Friday with Doom and Animal Crossing, and in this hypothetical scenario, Doom and Animal Crossing are on the same cluster that you are on a multi-tenant server. So your game launches, and then Doom comes along, and that launches as well. And the success of Doom, the servers aren't going to cope quite well with the amount of people Doom's going to bring in, and they're definitely not going to cope with the amount that Animal Crossing's bringing in at the exact same time. So being on a multi-tenant server, it's likely that your game or Animal Crossing or all three games are actually going to suffer from login issues, from requests failing, data not being stored correctly because the service is just under so much load. So by being a single tenant provider, you can ensure that your game and your brand is protected from scenarios like that. It is only your game running on these resources on this server, and it's only your data being processed there. So you can kind of have that reassurance that nothing bad is going to happen while it's just your game or your game services running there. Another important thing to note is that you own your data. So every single bit of data the platform generates, that is yours to own, and we don't have any influence or access to that particular data unless we're facilitating you with manipulating it or, pumping it out to some other service that you want to do something with it. We don't sell that data; it is yours to own. And yeah, so with that, I will kind of cover how we're going to start a game up on our service. So we're assuming at this point in this particular demo that you've contacted us and we've stood the service up. You want to start integrating AccelByte into your game. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to quickly jump over to our player portal. So I'm going to go to demo.accelbyte.io. And as I've covered in 4 of the previous sessions that we've done this week, the player portal is where users can log into your particular backend as a server. At the moment, I'm logged in with an admin account, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out here and log in with a regular player account. So I'm going to type in Shane, and we'll log in with this particular one. And as this particular user, you'll see I have my username, my Justice currency, which is our name of our virtual currency here. We'll see things like this is the user ID for this user. These are the games that this user owns. And we want to be able to access this user account from within a game client, because that will let us do pretty much anything else we need to do with the platform, such as finding friends, chatting to them, playing multiplayer games, even just playing the game and saving data to my particular player profile. So in order to get that done, I need to jump over to our admin portal. And again, I'm just going to log out and then log back in as our admin real quick. And then we will slide on over to our admin panel, and my address bar never wants to behave, but here we are. So I've covered the admin portal in some depth this week already, and I will be going over all of this again in a session later on today, which is semi a repeat of what we did early on Monday mornings, but just a different time slot effectively. So if you feel like you need a refresher, you can tune into that. But this is our backend. This is our game configuration. And I've covered it a couple of times again this week as well. The AccelByte platform isn't just a singular game container. There's not just one game existing in this backend platform. This is your brand's backend platform. This is, if you're a small developer, this is small developer company backend. If you're a big publisher, this is big publisher backend. And you can see that by this drop down here. We are in the top level of this game configuration. This is the AccelByte publisher namespace. And what that lets us do here is configure everything under our entire platform. But what we need to do for this particular demo is we're going to create a namespace for our game. And what that is that's a smaller kind of subset game configuration just for this particular game we're going to be creating. So I'm going to click over here into namespaces, and you can see we have quite a few here already. I'm going to add a new namespace, and I'm just going to call it GDC Demo 1. And I'll give it an incredibly inventive name of GDC Demo 1. And we'll load here, and we'll see that we've created this new namespace. So we can see some generic information like this namespace is active, when it was created, when it was last modified. I can add new currencies to this namespace. However, for now, I'm just going to leave it at the bare bones default because we're just doing a very simple implementation with our backend. So with our namespace created, I can just refresh this page just to make sure we actually have it in our list, but I can scroll down in our namespace list and you'll see we have GDC Demo 1, and we have a subset of the features we're able to configure for this specific game only. So as a admin of this, I can go into GDC Demo 1, I can configure the in-game store, I can configure how statistics are tracked, the dedicated servers, the matchmaking rules, specific legal documents for this particular game. All that information, anything that's changed below this namespace is only affecting this individual game. So fairly straightforward. We will jump back up to our publisher namespace, and what we're going to do is we're going to create some credentials. So credentials are what our game clients are going to use to connect to our backend platform before a user logs in. So it's just going to do the initial handshake, ensure that, yes, this is in fact the game that it claims to be. And then from there, we can log a user in and do all of our standard API calls. So we're going to click Create a New Client here. And I'm going to open up my text editor and just note down our client ID. So we're going to copy our client ID. That's important. I'm going to copy our secret in a sec. So we just jump down. I'm going to make a field here for secret in my text editor. And we're going to generate the client secret. I'm going to copy that. And there we go. And we just have to configure some other things that are kind of for reporting purposes or specific purposes of, if there's a callback URL, all these other things. So our client name, again, going to be very creative here and say GDC demo 1. We're going to tie it to the specific namespace that we've created, also called GDC demo 1. I'm actually going to put client here so we don't confuse the two. And we could set a target audience, but we're not going to do this. This is really for more granular control over which specific versions of clients and all that other stuff can actually use this credential. But for now, we're just going to leave it blank. And a base URL, we're just going to use https demo.accelbyte.io/IAM as a placeholder. And then similarly, redirect URL, we're going to use http 127.0.0.1. And we're going to create this credential. So as I've mentioned before, this credential is what's going to allow our SDK in our game client to connect to the backend and do the initial handshake and just verify that, yes, this particular client, this application that's running on this computer has the permission to connect to the server and start logging people in. So we're going to click create. Takes a second, and we don't save any of our passwords on my multiple password managers. And you can see that this is the credential that we are going to be using. So the three key fields we're going to be using in our application here is the client ID, which I've copied, our secret, which we can't see, and our namespace, which I've also copied. And then real quick, I'm not going to configure any permissions here because the bare bones base permissions are enough to log a user in, but this is where you'd add in all the permissions to allow users and enable that fine-grained granular control that I covered in a previous video this week. And you can just make sure that users aren't using any particular function they're not supposed to. That's where that would go. But for now, we can leave it empty as we should just be able to log in with it empty. So we've created our game namespace. We've created our credentials. I can click into our namespace here, and I could start, finding information about users. I could start configuring stores, but I'm not going to do that just now. I'm going to search for a user called Shane. None exists in this game yet, but next we're going to go over to our documentation portal and we're going to get our Unity SDK. So I click on AccelByte and Docs, and this is our documentation portal. Pretty handy. Pretty standard, just a documentation portal, has everything you need. We're also in the process of updating this and kind of making it a bit more modern feeling and a bit more comprehensive, but everything you need to get started is here and you should be able to work with that. So we're going to go to download our Unity SDK here. It will bring us to our GitHub where you can see all of our code. For these quick purposes, I'm just going to download it as a zip file here. And while that's downloading, I'm going to open up Unity. And just a heads up, I have built a simple UI for logging people in earlier on. While it's downloading, I'm going to cover what it's going to do. So we have our UI canvas here. We have our username input field, our password input field, and our login button. So as a user, I'm going to do a very old style, MMO style login. I'm going to type in my email address. I'm going to type in my password. I'm going to click login, and we're going to get some data back from the server. And that's the end goal for this particular integration demo. It should be fairly easy and fairly straightforward. So we go to our downloads, and we should have AccelByte SDK here. And there is a lot of extra information in the SDK, but the only thing we're going to use today is just two folders. We're going to use AccelByte and resources, I believe. So if I open up my assets folder for this project, we go into assets, and I go back to my downloaded zip, wherever it went. There it is. And I'm going to copy these two folders in, and this is kind of the bare bones AccelByte plugin. We have a lot of extra functionality here for if you wanted to integrate with Steam and so on. We keep track of those plugins specifically as well. But all we need is AccelByte and resources. So it's going to import. And because I didn't take in any of the test package, I'm going to have to make one small modification to the code here. As you'll see, we have an error. So if I open up Visual Studio here, I'll bring that over on screen. And let's finish loading. Close user models, and we close this, and we close this, and we want to open, user models is what we want to open. So this particular error is only being generated right now as we have a test package in our full GitHub, and I only pulled in a subset of the plugin's requirements. So if we save that out, the error should disappear in Unity, and we no longer have an issue. So I will bring up our portal again very quickly. If we go back to our credentials, and we go up here and clients, and we drop down to our GDC demo 1. So this is the credential I created earlier on, and we need to fill these fields in our SDK before we can actually make a connection to the server. So in order to do that, we have a resources folder here, and we have the AccelByte SDK config file. So we can double click on that, and again, it opens up Visual Studio. And this is where we enter in 3 key pieces of information. We need the namespace of the particular game we're connecting to. So I made a note of that earlier on, and we can see it here. It's GDC demo 1, so I can just copy and paste that into this particular space. And then we also need the client ID and the client secret. So I'm going to open up my other text editor and copy those from where I did earlier on. And we're going to paste them in here. And we'll paste our secret in as well. And there we go. That's all the configuration we need for connecting to the server. So I will bring our Unity back up here. And what we're going to do now is we're going to start writing some code. So we'll make a game object that hosts the logic for our AccelByte function. So we're just going to call this AccelByte logic. And then we're going to create a script called, we'll just call it AccelByte login or something like that. So AccelByte login. And we will start writing some code. And I will hopefully be able to type without creating too many typos, but we'll see how we go. So right up here at the top, we're going to put in our kind of the namespaces we'll be using. So the important ones are AccelByte core. So we want AccelByte.core. We want our API, so using AccelByte.api. And finally, we want our models. So AccelByte models. And I'll explain as we're using the particular functions that require these in a moment. So the other thing we're also going to use is we're going to use a username and password string. So we will make a private string username. We'll just initialize that to be empty, and another private string password. And we'll initialize that to be empty. And then while I'm at it here, I'm actually going to encapsulate those with a get and set property. So we can just quickly use a shortcut in Visual Studio. And then finally, the things we're going to use next are our object, which is going to hold our user instance. So we're going to use private, and then we're going to use a structure called user. And we're going to call this our AccelByte user. And we're going to, again, do another private, and then we're going to use our model for user data, AB user data. And then what's going to happen is we're going to initialize our AccelByte plugin with an empty AccelByte user. We're going to log the user in. We're going to then, once the login has been confirmed successful, we're going to get some data about this user and return it to our console down here in Unity. So we need to call something when we start. So we're going to initialize our AB user with some empty data, which is going to initialize the AccelByte plugin. So we're going to say AccelByte plugin dot get user. And that's all we need to do to initialize the plugin. It's fairly easy and fairly straightforward. And then our next function is going to be login user. So I'm going to make a public because we need the Unity UI to hook into this and be able to call it. So public void login user, and we'll brackets. And then we're going to use AB user, which is our empty AccelByte user object. And then this has built-in functions for things you're allowed to do with the particular user. So you can log them in, log them out, refresh their data, reset their password, all that fun stuff. The one we're going to use today is login with username. And this takes 2 strings, and then we need to provide a callback function for this to process that data. So in this particular case, we're going to use our username and our password that we have up there. And then we're going to use a callback function called login callback that we haven't created yet. And that's it. So it's going to complain that we don't have login callback yet. So I'm going to actually quickly just generate that method here. And you can see here it takes a result of result. And this is from our AccelByte.core. So with our login, we're going to first check if the result has an error. So .is error. And if it is, we're going to say, just give us some information about what went wrong. So debug.log, we're going to say encountered an error. And we're going to have it kind of print out what the error message was. I'll put a space there so it can be read. We're going to say results.error.message. And then now, if we have any particular issues with logging into our service, we should get some feedback as to what exactly went wrong. On our next line, we're going to put else, and then so if we don't have any error, we're going to say debug.log. We're going to say login success, and then we're going to request the user information. So we don't have a function for this yet, but I'm going to call it get user details, and it's not going to take any extra parameters. And then down here below it, we're going to write our function. So public void get user details. And so in order to get the user details, much like we did when we were logging the user in, I'm in fact going to make this just a little bit bigger so that it's easier to see on screen. We have our user object. We initialize it with some empty user data to initialize the AccelByte plugin. We then log the user in by using that user object and the login function. And similarly, now that we have the user logged in, if we were successful, we're going to say abuser.get, I believe it is, let me see if I have the correct stuff. Get data is the one we're looking for. And then also, you'll notice a pattern here. Whenever we do a function for requesting data from AccelByte, we also need to put in a callback for how we're going to use that particular bit of information. So I'm going to say, make another function called get data callback, because again, I'm incredibly inventive when it comes to programming names. So this function doesn't exist yet, so we can just generate a method for it. And you'll see that we have, again, using another core, we're using the result from core. We're also using the user data model from AccelByte.models, which we previously requested up here. And we're just calling this result again. So what we're going to do is, again, a nice pattern to have is just always check if the result is an error. And if it is, we can throw up some information about what particularly happened. So debug.log. And we could log an error, but for now, I'm just going to stick with text. And we're going to say get user data failed. And again, I'm just going to put in the result.error.message. So it makes it easier for us to debug. I could also, in fact, let's just go debug.log and then response code. And then in our result, we can get the error again, and we can say .code. And then that will return whether it was a 404 error or a 501 or any fun errors that might happen while we're writing our game. However, if the getData request was successful, we're going to say our AB user data, which is our variable up top for storing the particular information about the player, is going to equal result.value. And so real quick, with the value thing, this is where we're storing all the particular information about the user. So we can see we have auth type, whether they have any bans, the country, their date of birth, their display name. We can get all sorts of information about our user through this. But for now, we're just going to have that particular data object result equal the value of our response. And to finish things off, we're going to go debug.log, and we're going to just pull the display name for the user. So name, and then plus didn't type in AB user data dot display name. It'd be handy if the autocomplete stuff wasn't hiding over what I was typing. But yeah, we're going to get the display name and print that out. And then we'll get a couple of other things like their user ID. We can, again, AB user data dot user ID. And then for just demo purposes, we'll pull out their session ID as well. You could use this to validate whether or not that the particular session is different from the last one. Or I need to pull that out of AB user, in fact. So AB user dot session dot where is our session ID? I will use the authorization token for now, and we'll find that at another time. So to recap what we're doing in our code, we have a username string, a password string. We're also using get and set for our username and password. We have our empty user object that we're using to initialize the plugin, as well as the user data. We have our actual user data, which is a model that we're storing all of the particular information about the user, be it their username, their session ID, their email address, how much currency they have, if they've been banned before, whether they've signed a legal contract, or all these kind of things. And then when we initialize this particular script, we're going to initialize the plugin with our user. This will get an empty user object. We will then, in our Unity UI here, we'll type in our username and our password. We'll click login. We will send those up to the server, and the server will ping back with a result, and that's when our login will be triggered. We will check if this login has an error. If it does, we will display that message in our console. If it doesn't, we will say login success in our console, and we will request some user data. We will then use this function for, again, triggering it from our AB user. We will get the data and send it to a callback. And again, a nice pattern to have is just check if there's an error, report what the error is. Otherwise, return the user data and print out some of that data that we can put back into our game engine. And that's pretty much what we will cover for this particular lesson, but we can jump over here to our Unity scene, and I have my AccelByte game object here, so I need to attach our AccelByte login, and this is going to run that start function when we click play. But what I'm also going to do here is I'm going to click on our input field, and whenever we change the value for our username, we're going to update the username string in our logic. So I believe we are looking for username. And then again, in our password input field, we're going to onValue changed. We're going to drag our AccelByte logic. This is not necessarily the best way of actually doing this particular, but for a demo, it's the quickest. So that's the reason we're doing it in this particular style using the Unity UI functionality. And then for our login button, on click, we're going to call our. Oh, we never actually did. Oh, we did. Yeah. So I put in the wrong game object, login button. So AccelByte logic. There we go. That makes more sense. AccelByte login, and we're going to log the user in with that. So I'm going to save my scene here so we don't lose it if something crashes. But we can click play, and what you'll see happen here is on start we called AccelByte.getUser, and because we've called that getUser function and we didn't have an instance of AccelByte running in the game scene, it has instantiated the AccelByte object that is managing the connection between the game engine or the game client rather, and the back end. So if I unplay here, you'll see we only have our script that requires that. And there is a pattern with some other SDKs where you have to put in the manager for that specific SDK. But here, it self-manages itself. It deletes itself when it's finished. So when we click play and we call any aspect of that particular SDK, it will spawn, instantiate that object and manage itself for the duration of the session. So what we've done now is we've hit our start point here. So we're going to enter our username. And another question you might be asking is, well, we've just created this new game. We haven't registered any users yet. How are we going to log in with a user we haven't created? So I'll quickly jump back to our portal. So if I go to demo.accelbyte.io, as I mentioned before, the AccelByte configuration, the top-level namespace configuration, is the publisher level configuration. So if you were to take someone like Bethesda, for instance, if you logged into Fallout 4, you wouldn't expect to have to create an entirely new account for Doom, let's say. So what this is doing is if you're playing Doom for the first time, it will actually check, does this account exist on the parent level game configuration? And if it does, we'll use some of that information, but we'll give it a different user ID. So that's very much what's happening here. So I click on my account, and I'll actually log out and log back into my regular Shane account, not Shabe. So Shane, log in, and I'll go to our account here. So this is the account we're going to pull in, and the only thing that's going to be different is this user ID, because this is the top level publisher account, and we're going to be generating a new game level account. So we're going to use Shane at accelbyte.net. And my incredibly secure password, I'm going to type it in here and make sure nobody's able to guess it. And we'll keep our console open here. And you'll see as soon as I click login, we're going to make all of the necessary API requests. And we're going to get responses. And we're going to print out data. And hopefully everything goes well. So I click login. You can see the current functions were called. We got a login success, which in our code is down here. So login success. So we're now requesting our get user details. We call our function and we wait for the callback for that, and that callback was successful. So we got our username, which is Shane, we got our user ID, and we got our session ID, which is the auth token that we're currently using. So as I mentioned there, the user ID here is different, so we can actually jump into our admin portal very quickly. So we log out of our user, log in with our admin, and then go to the actual admin portal. So this is the top level publisher namespace. If I go to user accounts and type in Shane, we can see the account that we were using on the website. So you can see the user ID is 7A6141. But if we jump into our namespace that we created for this specific game, we should now have a user called Shane under here, and the user ID should match the user ID we got back in our console, which is 882BF537D494. And that's it. That's how easy it is to implement the SDK into a specific game project. This was a completely brand new empty project with the exception of the UI that I had built before the demo started. But what you would do in this case is, on the success of getting the user data back or logging in, you would now show the main menu screen. And I can actually show that working in a full-blown game. So we have built a sample game with our team at AccelByte. We currently have it launching from Steam. We currently have it launching from our own launcher, which I covered in a previous video. So if I go to, I won't actually use Steam to launch it. I'll use just the executable, so that way you can see the exact same pattern here with an email and password. So this is our game. You can see it has the same email, password, login setup. So I can type in here, Shane at AccelByte. I'll type in capital letters, and then we can go to our password and my incredibly secure password. This is the exact same account I just logged into with the Unity client as well, so it's worth keeping note of that. So I click login, it loads me in, and this is my account. I can click up here, and I can see that this account also has a separate player ID. So I can show off that again real quick. If I go to the namespace for our sample game, which is Light Fantastic, and I go to users, and I type in Shane. When I logged in with this user the first time, it contacted the parent level game configuration, saw that we already have a user associated with this account, and it pulled that user information in for the sub-level game account. And yeah, it is that easy. It's pretty simple to set it up. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, I guess feel free to ask. I can try and step through some things, or we could experiment with some of the stuff. It doesn't even have to be related to this specific topic I've been talking about. But I will probably leave the question time up for 5 or 10 minutes. And yeah, we'll see where we go from there. So please ask questions. While we're waiting for some questions, I'm actually going to open up this game project in Unity, so bear with me a moment. And as you can see here, it's the same flow we just saw with the particular game client. Close this for now. And we can log our user in. And I, in fact, need to mute my headset because the game music is... My microphone. There we go. Hello. So this is the game project for the game that I launched from Steam. And what we're just doing is we're going to log in here in the Unity editor, and you'll see the same flow that we saw in the game and both the game and the Unity engine project that I created just for this talk. But what's going to happen is you're going to see a few of the things. You can already see the console is filled with a few other variables already. We're checking, whether or not we've launched with Steam. We're making sure that all of our callbacks are enabled and subscribe to the correct functions, so that when we do receive a message from the server that we're able to handle that correctly. And when I log in, you're going to see the same information being pulled in, my username, my password, all of that fun stuff. But with the difference being we're also going to connect to our lobby. So I didn't cover it at the start of this, but I have covered it in previous videos, so make sure you check them out. But effectively, AccelByte is most of its services are using REST API, and then all of the social, like chat, friends, notifications, matchmaking, they're all using WebSockets. So when we connect to that lobby, we're connecting, we're doing a handshake with the WebSocket service and keeping that alive. So I'm going to click log in here, and you'll see that working away, doing all its connections, getting the information back. And we can see all this information kind of passing back and forth between the server as we click around in the game. And this is what a kind of a quote-unquote full game integration would look like. It's a kind of a very simple game for our specific needs. I can equip items, I can equip hats or effects. In this case, I've unequipped them, so let's make our effect equipped. I'm going to save this to the player profile. I can click play and I can find a match. But in this particular instance, I don't have one. But you can see I've pulled back some particular information like my username, the player ID, email, and some statistics as well about how many times I've won versus lost. I'm very good at this game. So Train and Joseph, if you're watching, I will challenge you to a rematch at any time. But it's the exact same as what you see in the client. It's the exact same in that previous demo or the previous project that I also had open, just built out a bit more. So I'll open again now. Oh, the project's already open. Is this? So, yeah. Cool. Well, no questions in yet, so I'll probably leave this video here. I will be doing this same session again on Friday, so if you missed the start of it, or it was just too early, it is at a later time slot as well, so be sure to check out our schedule on our website. If you're on the website, you can click this Live Now button, or you can go to our blog, and you'll see pretty much all of the information you need to about what time we're doing things, what days, what topics we're doing on what days. If I click on our full schedule here, you can see our full time slots. So this afternoon, I will be going over how to become your own publisher with AccelByte, basically covering the storefront player portal that you've seen a little bit of here today, as well as the launcher, and then kind of how we drive some of those values with the admin portal that you've also seen here. Tomorrow I'll be covering managing your users, so kind of diving a bit deeper into pulling back users, how you could use this system to manage your users as a customer support representative, as well as how to grant entitlements and give them credits if something bad were to happen to their account, and some similar features as well. But with that, I want to say thank you for watching. Please do contact us. You can visit our website at AccelByte.io. We do have a handy little Ask Us Anything button down here that will get an email to the right people. But you can also just send the message straight to AccelByte.io, or join our Discord, ask us some questions there, our virtual booth, and we'd be happy to answer. So thank you very much. I've been Shane, and see you later on.